With the global economy and the Chinese economy in peril lately, the CBOE Volatility Index, or VIX, popped in the last week. Here, as you can see on this chart, the CBOE Volatility Index is up to 27.56. Just a week ago, on February 19th, it was only at 14.38. This is a big pop in only a week. And this is a big red flag with VIX Pops, especially with the leveraged short volatility trade that volatility hedge fund manager Christopher Cole has been talking about for years now. He's written amazing in-depth research papers. He's very smart, very sophisticated. He's one of the brightest minds in finance, up there with David Einhorn and Kyle Bass, in my opinion. And listening to his interviews, you learn a lot, but a lot of the stuff he says is very sophisticated. So if you're just a beginner, a lot of it will be over your head. But for more advanced people, and financial professionals, the interviews he has put out in the last couple weeks are incredible. I'll talk about that in a second. This is what a volatility ETF is, the definition of a volatility ETF. And currently, there are 7 volatility ETFs right now. This is a list of the 7 volatility ETFs right now, and these could be in peril, according to hedge fund manager Christopher Cole. I'll talk about why in a little bit. And why is only about 2 years ago, there was another accident with a volatility ETF with a similar spike in volatility. Christopher Cole, in the last 2 weeks, he has done a lot of interviews. He's been working the circuit now with interviews. He put out a research paper, another one, in-depth one, that is a must-read for financial professionals if they're serious, if they're not salespeople. And the first interview he did a couple weeks ago was for Dimitri Kofinas and Hidden Forces. I listened to that one, so you can go listen to that one for free now. This interview he did recently as well with Eric Townsend at Macro Voices. This is another in-depth interview. This interview he did with Danielle DiMartino Booth for Real Vision TV. Now, right now, this is behind a paywall, but what could happen probably is in the next couple weeks, maybe a month or two, Real Vision TV will release this on their YouTube channel, because that's what they have been doing for free. So keep an eye out for that if you're not a Real Vision TV subscriber. If you are a Real Vision TV subscriber, I highly recommend watching that interview. If you're not a Real Vision TV subscriber and you're on the fence, that interview, in my opinion, is probably worth the price of admission. That's how good the interview is. It's a really good in-depth interview and analysis. He talks in there about how the leveraged short volatility trade in only about 4 years has gone from about $1.5 trillion in size. Because I remember in 2016 when I had just found Christopher Cole's work and I was listening to his interviews on Macro Voices and elsewhere. And he was talking about the size of the leveraged short volatility trade on the VIX and in stocks, and how it was about $1.5 trillion in size, directly or indirectly. In this interview here for Real Vision TV, he talks about how now it's around $3 trillion in size for directly and indirectly to short volatility for income products on the VIX and on stocks. And unfortunately, there's even more leveraged short vol trades on other markets like commodities and things like that. So this is an absolutely insane amount of leveraged short volatility trades, and we could see some blow-ups similar to what I'm going to talk about in the next slide here, where in early February 2018, the XIV and the SVXY were halted pending news. And these volatility ETFs got absolutely hammered in a very short amount of time. Both of them plunged over 80% effectively, triggering a termination event. Now, all of them were not totally shut down. I believe only one of them was shut down, but the VIX surged a record 116%. So we're not at 116% surge in the VIX, but if things keep this pace with the stock market, the Chinese economy, the global supply chain, with the news that's coming out that's CV related or Cerveza problem related, I could definitely see that. And the termination event, this is following up another similar story from that day. If you want to go back and read the obituaries of this VIX-related product, this volatility ETF, the XIV, Christopher Cole actually predicted in his paper a couple years ago. I think his paper came out a few months before this volatility ETF blew up. So he called these and he said these are just the beginning. So he's actually predicting that more of these volatility ETFs, the ones that I talked about earlier, those 7 or so, could all be in jeopardy, as well as other problems. This is another story going in depth about problems. This is an exchange traded note, problems with volatility exchange traded notes. This article is actually honest. This is warning people about, and this is a must read, about the VIX ETFs, that they don't reflect VIX volatility indexes, and that they tend to lose money, significant money, the longer you hold these things. So this is a must read article for anyone that buys these VIX options or trades the VIX and doesn't pay attention to it. They can lose a lot of money. 91%, this article's a couple years old, and 91% found the article helpful. So I think if you're interested in trading this and you're looking to trade volatility, and I expect now that volatility is going to pick up a lot, we're already seeing it in just the last week, a big spike in the VIX, that we could have another big blow up in one of those or more of those volatility ETFs or ETNs. Finally, last slide here. These are the 2 things on Twitter that you can follow if you want to see when Artemis Capital, which is the volatility hedge fund that Christopher Cole is the chief investment officer for and he manages, if you want to see when they publish new research papers, or when Christopher Cole, who just joined Twitter, there's his Twitter handle there, @vol_Christopher, when he does new interviews. So overall, this is something that we need to be paying more attention to, but it is very worrisome how there is so many leverage short volatility trades, not just in stocks, not just on the VIX, but in many other different markets. And the size of the leverage short volatility trade for the VIX and stocks has gone from, in only 4 years, has gone from 1.5 trillion in size up to 3 trillion, at least 3 trillion directly and indirectly in size. And a lot of this is because of central banks and governments artificially manipulating interest rates lower, forcing interest rates lower, and using financial repression. And you have these desperate pension funds and institutional investors desperate to make income, where trying to squeeze blood from a stone, trying to pick off pennies in front of a steamroller, trying to pick quarters off a freeway. Not a very good idea, but in the short term, these strategies to pull income out off shorting volatility made money. But in a scenario like we have now, with the global economy, with the Chinese economy, with the global supply chain, with the CV problems in the US now that President Trump just did with his press conference, these things mean that there's volatility is going to be back. I would be very surprised if volatility comes down all of a sudden, especially with what we've seen out of the stock market and bond market and gold prices lately. And finally, more of my ad revenue is being taken away. I've had a number of videos that have not had ad revenue now in the last week or so. So it's up to, I think, 6 or 7 now videos that have not had ad revenue in the week or so. Thank you very much to my over 300 Patreon account contributors who are chipping in behind the paywall. I just put out a new audio podcast about a lot of questions that people have been asking the last couple days about gold stocks and how they might fare in a stock market sell-off. So if you want to pay $5 a month, definitely worth the money to go behind the paywall and check that out. There's a lot of audio podcasts there and quite a few written articles on a lot of different topics. My priority right now is to take care of my Patreon account contributors first, because it looks like at a certain point I'm not going to be making any money whatsoever from any of these videos on YouTube.